It's late at night. You're watching a handsome 25-year-old hunk talk about weird shit on YouTube. Then you hear the doorbell. You open the door and there's a kid standing there, but there's something strange about them. Something similar happened to Brian Bethel.
I have no good explanation for what happened to me at all. And it's one of the most frightening things that ever happened in my life.
He was sitting in his car near a movie theater parking lot when he heard a tapping on his window. He looked over and saw two kids standing right next to him. This startled Brian because the parking lot had been completely empty just moments before. It was like they just appeared out of thin air. He didn't notice anything strange about the kids at first, so Brian rolled down his window. The kids said they wanted to see Mortal Kombat, but forgot their money at home. They asked Brian for a ride to go get it. Now Brian's a good guy, so he actually considered it. After all, kids walking alone at night isn't the best idea. But then he realized what time it was. He explained to the kids that the last showing of Mortal Kombat was already half over. By the time they got back, they would only be able to catch the very end of it. The kids didn't let up and kept asking. As the conversation went on, Brian noticed the unusual way they were speaking. It was like a hypnotic sales pitch, like they'd done this successfully many times before. It started to give him a dreadful feeling inside. Then the hoods on their jackets shifted a bit and Brian noticed something terrifying. Their eyes were jet black.
I see their eyes, and they are cold, black, soulless orbs, no iris, no sclera, just one black void. They were like shards of night, and I am more frightened than I have ever been in my entire life.
Alarm bells went off in Brian's head, but he tried his best not to panic. He told the kids that he couldn't help them and quickly rolled up his window. The kids instantly let out screams that didn't sound human and began beating on his car. At this point, Brian did freak out and struggled to get his keys in the ignition. He said it felt like forever. The last thing he remembers hearing was one of them shrieking, "We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in." Finally, Brian got his car in gear and drove away as fast as he could. When he looked in the rearview mirror, the kids had vanished. Now, Brian was a journalist with the Abilene Reporter and thought coming forward about this encounter might damage his career, so he kept it to himself for 2 years. In 1998, he finally shared his story on a small paranormal mailing list group. After it made the rounds, he found out he wasn't alone. Black-eyed kid sightings went as far back as the 1950s and all across the world. One woman claimed she stopped off at a convenience store and left her 10-year-old son in the car. She was only gone for a couple minutes. When she got back in the car, she checked her mirror and saw a pale child with totally black eyes staring back at her. She screamed and pulled her son out of the car. Once they were outside, she looked through the window and there was no one there. The black-eyed child had vanished. Her son said he had invited the kid into the car. The story doesn't end there. The woman was too frightened to drive her own car home, so her husband came to help and they switched cars in the parking lot. On the way home, her husband was in a severe car accident which totaled the vehicle. Shortly after that, her son came down with some sort of extreme mystery illness which lasted for weeks and puzzled doctors. This seems to be a common theme after someone encounters black-eyed children. Bad things happen to them. Is this some sort of residual effect, or just a coincidence? Sightings are still happening today. In the summer of 2021, two British teenagers, Ben and Kylie, were tired of being isolated from each other. So they snuck off to Birches Valley Forest to camp out together illegally. Everything was fine and they were having a great time. Until midnight. They heard something moving around outside their tent. They froze. Initially, they thought it was just wildlife. Maybe a deer or a rabbit. Then they heard what sounded like human footsteps. They worked up their courage and unzipped the tent. They couldn't see much at first, but then they heard a child giggling. Ben frantically turned on his flashlight and started scanning the area. Then they saw it. A small girl running back and forth between the trees and peeking out at them. She didn't move like a normal human though. Her movements were way too fast, and she seemed to be able to disappear and reappear in different places. Finally, the little girl stepped out from behind a tree and revealed herself. She stood completely still and stared at them with her jet black eyes. She tilted her head and began giggling again. Then Ben and Kylie heard the giggling getting louder from all around them. It sounded like they were completely surrounded. Then the giggling died down, and the whispers started. Whispers asking to be led inside. Ben and Kylie stayed awake until sunrise. When they finally left the tent, they discovered piles of stones surrounding their campsite and strange wooden figures hanging from trees. On their walk back to the car, Kylie saw the black-eyed girl again, staring at them from behind a tree. Kylie and Ben ran the rest of the way, and luckily, the black-eyed girl didn't give chase. So what actually happens when you do let the black-eyed kids inside? In 2016, an old couple in Vermont claimed they found out. During an especially cold January night, they heard a knock. The woman opened her door and saw two kids, a boy and a girl, shivering and covered in snow on her doorstep. They asked to come in and make a phone call. The woman was shocked to see two children out in the cold, so she hurried them inside. She told them to warm up and went to find the phone. When she returned, she found them in the living room staring at her husband. Now that she could see them clearly in the light, she saw their frightening black eyes. She was frozen in terror. And then she noticed her husband's nose begin to bleed. And then the power went out. It was pitch black and deathly silent. No one moved. The seconds felt like hours. Then, in unison, the children said, "Our parents are here now," and walked out the door. The woman went to the window and saw two men in vintage suits, both unusually tall and thin, standing in front of her house. They picked the children up, walked over to a black car, and drove away. The power came back on shortly after they left. Over the next few weeks, the couple suffered from frequent nosebleeds, and the husband was diagnosed with skin cancer. Their 4 cats also went missing. One of them was found dead, and the rest were never seen again. Pretty scary, but many witnesses say the couple is lucky to be alive. So what exactly are the black-eyed kids? Some people think they're vampires. It seems they do have to be invited in, and some eyewitness accounts describe them producing a hypnotic energy, but no fangs and no blood drinking as far as we know. They also seem to have the ability to disappear and reappear, to affect electricity, and cause bodily harm without physical touch, which leads to theories of black-eyed children being ghosts, demons, or even aliens. Are black-eyed kids really out there, stalking the streets and waiting for their next victim? Or maybe they're just an urban legend from the early days of the internet. But do you really think someone would do that? Just go on the internet and tell lies? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for being here with me, guys. I'll see you on the next one.